Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of About Her. Today, I'm here with the wonderful Patti Clark. Patti, thank you so much for being here. I'm
My
really
pleasure. Thank you.
excited for having you here, and I would love to start with you sharing your journey, because I know you've wrote at least 2 books I know of, and there's so much I want to ask you. So maybe you can just share with a bit of a summary of what brought you here.
Okay. Yeah, it's sort of hard to know how far back to go, but I will try to synopsize it. Really, where I have to start is growing up, because I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. Anna, you and I were talking about the importance of grandparents and and you're close to your mother, and just that's so beautiful. Unfortunately, I grew up in a very chaotic home. My mother was an alcoholic. She died when I was 16, and the way that was role modeled for me and what I learned at an early age is that drugs and alcohol worked very well to numb my pain. So grew up with a lot of trauma, learned to numb that trauma early on. I grew up in San Francisco in the 60s and 70s, and so there was a lot of drugs and alcohol. And that was the way that I coped. I fast forward a bit, got in trouble, made some stupid mistakes. But just before I was 30, I decided I was going to not be my mother. My husband and I were decided that we wanted to have kids. And I said, I am not going to make the same mistakes. So I got sober just before my 30th birthday. And I was clean and sober for almost 13 years. We moved to a small town. My life changed. I thought, I don't need this anymore. So I started drinking again, and I drank for another 13 years and then came back into recovery. And I've been clean and sober this time for just over 10 years. And so that's kind of the journey that created the person I am now. My first book, I was running workshops for teenagers in New Zealand where we lived. And they were called Teen Esteem workshops, and sort of helping teenagers, not with any academics, but with that internal stuff. And it grew, it was doing great. We used a lot of creativity. You talked about some of the things that could help to connect to self. We used a lot of creativity. We did meditation, we did journaling, we did drawing, we did visualization. These are all tools that I talk about in my books as well. And the mothers of the kids came to me and said, we love what you're doing. We want to do it. So a friend of mine and I started another group of workshops for women. And it was 6 days over one day at a time for 6 weeks. And at the end of it, women consistently said, we want more. Is there a workbook or something? So that's when I wrote my first book, which was This Way Up, 7 Tools for Unleashing Your Creative Self and Transforming Your Life. And that was about women connecting back to self, and sort of a next step after that workshop, with a lot of journaling prompts, etc. And then I was, when I relapsed that time that I was talking about before, and then came back into recovery, I was really curious as to what other women's experience was that relapsed. So I made it my job to talk to as many women as possible that I met online or I met in workshops, etc., that had relapsed and decided to find sobriety again. And I found out a lot of things about the experience of women, their experience in 12-step programs, because that was the path that I was on, and their experience outside of 12-step programs that brought them back to a place of sobriety, but not through the same path. And so I collected all this data, all this information out of my own curiosity. But then I kept getting this tap on my shoulder, saying, come on, Patti, come on, write this down, write a book. Right? And I was like, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to. Because it's a lot of work, not just writing, but then getting it out there. It's a lot. But it was, my little inner self was saying, come on now, come on. And So there I was. And so I wrote my second book, which is Recovery Road Trip, um, Connecting on Your Journey Home, and finding purpose and connection on your journey home. My publisher changed that tagline, so I had to, sometimes I say the old one, so finding purpose and connection on your journey home. And that's how I came to write that book. And now kind of my raison d'etre is to be working with other women, talking to other women, especially around addiction, because so many of us are addicted. And even when we give up drugs or alcohol or mind altering things, we still find ourselves addicted to shopping, sex, food, screens. And so what is it? Why do we feel this need to escape? So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, thank you so much. I try to wrap my head around it because there's just so much I would love to ask. And I think what is coming to my mind first is like the strength of picking yourself up again in that, like when you relapsed, to find out that strength in yourself to say like, I'm doing it again. I know I've done it once. I can't like get sober again. This is something that, as you said, like maybe we cannot really compare alcohol addiction or drug addiction to addiction to food or screens, but still it's all addiction. I totally agree on that. And without being insensitive, there is a root cause that from my perspective is kind of like coming from the same vibe. And like depending on how we are wired, I would say like I have an addiction to sweetness, to sugar. It's really hard for me to stay off of that. But like alcohol is not interesting for me. Still, like I feel it's the same root of like maybe feeling not worthy, maybe not having the right coping mechanisms, or just falling back into old paradigms. So it's like how you picked yourself up and like believed in yourself so much that you kind of did it again, like become sober again. There needs to be, I imagine, a wave of strength coming out that you've unearthed somehow.
First of all, I want to say, yeah, with sugar, I mean, that's huge. And that's something I heard from a lot of women, that when they gave up drugs or alcohol, their sugar cravings went through the roof. I mean, part of that is that we have a reward center that rewards us with sugar. And women talked about gaining weight and then going through the whole seesaw of weight and, dieting and having, anyway, all of that. There's a lot of connection with that. But to get back to your question, thank you. It did take a lot. But what the difference was that time, Anna, was that I really got to the point the second time where I didn't like myself. And I had to really look at that concept. And I heard that from a lot of women that I spoke to. The first time that I got sober so that my husband wouldn't leave me. He gave one of those ultimatums, like, I don't like you when you're drinking. I don't blame you. I don't like myself when I'm drinking. And I didn't want to be my mother. So I didn't want to be drinking when I had children. Very good reasons, excellent reasons, but external reasons. And when I got sober the second time, I did it for me. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, Patti, I don't like you when you're drinking. My kids were grown at that point. They were, my oldest son was already at university. My second son was going to be going to university soon. And I thought, I could drink now and they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't notice. They wouldn't comment. So I'd be okay. This whole concept of who sees you makes it okay, right? That whole external, internal thing. And so I really had to say, I don't like you. You're not healthy. My body wasn't bouncing back the way it did when I was younger. When I had a few too many drinks, my body felt like shit for days, definitely for a full day, and sometimes for a couple of days. And so there was that, there was health, but mostly I just didn't like me. I was like, who are you? Why are you doing this? And so again, for me, it was another wave of therapy, another wave of working on deeper issues. There's a wonderful writer and speaker, a man named Gabor Mate. Do you know him?
Yes.
Yeah. And he talks about trauma is the root of addiction. And until we get that trauma out and really unearth it and sort through it, we are going to keep trying to take care of that trauma in unhealthy ways. And so, and thus, people that give up alcohol or drugs look for something else to fill that. Sometimes exercise, and they said, but it's good, I'm exercising. But they're exercising to an addictive level where they're exercising for hours and hours and hours in unhealthy ways. And, so we can couch it and say, oh, but that's okay because that's a healthy addiction.
Yeah.
There's no addiction that's
No.
healthy, and I love the saying that what I want is a life I love so much, I don't seek to escape it.
I think that sums it really up so beautifully, because what we're trying with all our addictions, like whether it might be a quote unquote healthy addiction or not, is escaping the current, the present reality. And therefore, not being present is like, we're meant to be present. Let's put it that way. So the moment we escape it, it's somehow getting away from ourselves. It's somehow unhealthy. So thank you for touching on that there are healthy addictions as well, because I see so many people like saying, I'm trying to like feel better through having an addiction that is not through drugs or chemical substances, but it's a different way of like not being with yourself and not being fine the way you are. So what I think is really important is this concept of finding it from the inside. And it might be hard for everyone to hear who is a partner, a loved one, family member of someone who is addicted to something, which might be all of us, because everyone kind of has their own addictions. So is this like, you cannot make someone else give up their addiction because it has to come from the inside. And it's so hard to watch people you love being in a state where they escape themselves, but it's nothing that you can do from the outside. It has to come from the person. It has to like be like you said, you looked yourself in the mirror and said like, I don't want to be this version of myself anymore. I want to like, say, jump timelines or however you want to call it, but you wanted to connect to a higher version of yourself, the one that is sober, the one that is like really present with herself and liking it that way. So it needs to come from inside.
Exactly. And that's not always easy. I mean, we can justify being a certain way, we really can, but we know, it's sort of like we can say, oh, this is okay, or this is too hard or whatever, but we know what version is the healthiest. And, you were talking about your son and my kids, and that's when I can really see that authentic, healthy self is when I am fully present with people I love, or even with people I don't love, where I'm not thinking about being somewhere else, doing something else, whatever, just being absolutely fully present and giving a person your undivided attention. And it's really sad how, I'm sure you see it too. Just when I see parents now with kids that are just on their phone and not present, and I'll be at a playground or something with my grandson and see all of these people on phones, and their kids run up and say, come, I want to show you, or come and play this with me. And parents are on their phone. It's like, oh, put down your phone, honey. This moment is going to change in a minute. You are not going to have this moment again. And this is precious. But, yeah, our society.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because like we've kind of like been so strict on so many drugs, and like everyone feels so good and taking them, and we're all getting closer to nature and like being more, in sync with ourselves and all of that. It's beautiful. No judgment on this, but on the same time, me too. I see everyone with their phone, and especially with the kids, like it's escaping. So yeah, being a parent is sometimes just so exhausting, and it's annoying at times. And regardless of how much you love your kids, sometimes you need time for yourself. But is this the time for yourself? What are you like mirroring back to your children? So that is a strong addiction that I feel like almost everyone I know has. We're trying to raise our kid without the phone, which is a challenge. And yeah, he needs to like know that Technic is there to support us. And yeah, I'm on my laptop right now. But the question is like, do I escape? Or is this something that brings me joy? And what I remembered when you just said that, thank you so much for bringing it up, is we have been in Thailand last year for a month, and I cried when I've seen the children overweight with the phone in their hand at 2 years old, scrolling through TikTok or whatever for 2 hours straight, while we sit at the most beautiful place on earth. And we were like mesmerized by the beauty of nature and the water and the colorful fishes. And this kid that is a native there was just like occupied with the phone. And you could see that at 2 years old, the addiction was already full on. And
already setting.
I don't have words for that, but it's like a thing to become aware. And it's so hard because maybe, you know, from your own path, it's so hard to like really tell ourselves that there is an addiction there and really admit it to ourselves. So most people I talk about it, they say like, no, I don't have it. Like I'm not on my phone, but then you see them constantly. So there's this like two different perspectives of self maybe that need to be kind of combined before you can do the shadow work, do the trauma work, do the recovery.
Absolutely. And the neuroscience that's coming out with how our brains have changed since we've started using cell phones and you know, computer, that the change in our brains and the changes of the generation that have been raised with it is astonishing and terrifying. And yet here we are. Yeah, that instant gratification need, the inability to focus, the inability to stay focused on one thing, to sit down and read. You know, reading skills are going away. All of it is just so painful. And you know, like you and I were talking about, looking at some things that are happening now from afar and thinking, oh my gosh, I am powerless to change what's happening, but I see a nightmare unfolding.
Yeah. You touched upon something that I think is one of the biggest roots of addiction, which is this like instant gratification. And we're so good at it. We're so used to it with like technique at our fingertips, which is beautiful, by the way. I don't want to demonize it. I just want to like be more mindful about it. And with all the overflow of food, of entertainment, of like stuff, basically, we can have this instant gratification all the time. So I would love to like ask you from your standpoint on, is this the thing that like made you relapse or made you go back to a path that you've already kind of said you don't want to be on? This like having this instant gratification in a moment that is just like maybe too hard to cope, or it felt like you cannot find another way to cope with it rather than that
That's
familiar?
a great question. That's a great question. I don't think it was that. What I believe for me was, when I got sober the first time, it was in Tucson, Arizona. I went to a women's AA meeting, and there were about 25 women in there, most of them about my age, late 20s, early 30s. And there was a camaraderie and connection that blew my heart open. I was astonished and just grateful. Grateful beyond measure. It was. Thank you. And then when I moved to the small town in New Zealand, it wasn't the only reason. There were several reasons. I'm not blaming anyone or anything, but the recovery group was mostly old men, and there was a I heard again and again, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, shut up and listen. Don't pick up a drink and you'll be fine. And I was crying. I was emotional. We had just moved. I had young kids. I needed support. And they were just so dismissive and so pedantic and patriarchal. So it was a very different program. And when my kids got to school, which is when my youngest son was 5 when I started drinking again, and they were both at school, and all of the mothers would get together at each other's houses. We lived on the coast. They'd sit on their decks and drink wine. And I thought, this is where I feel connected, not with these old men. I don't have connection there. And there's a wonderful quote by a writer and sociologist, Johann Hari, and he says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I needed connection. So it wasn't so much of looking for instant gratification. I was seeking connection. My heart was crying out to find people that were my tribe. And so when I got sober the second time, because I knew that it wasn't working, it's like I had this connection with some of the women. And to be honest, it was fun. It was nice. The kids had friends, but I there was no deep conversations going on, right? It was very nice. And so anyway, then I was at a coffee shop with my son. He was getting ready to go to university that year. And a man walked into the coffee shop whom I recognized from before. He was a younger guy then. He was about my age now. And behind him walked a woman. And I remembered the guy from recovery. And I thought, I wonder if he's still in recovery. And the woman looked really cool. She had this flowing hair and this beautiful skirt. And I thought, she looks very cool. And so when they got their coffee and they sat down, I walked over and I said, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Patti. And he said, oh, I do remember you. I haven't seen you in a long time. And I said, good to see you again, but actually I'm not here to see you. I'm here to see the woman that's with you. Her name is Rosie. And I said, are you in recovery too? And she said, yes. And I said, Rosie, I desperately need a women's meeting. And she said, let's start one. And so we got together and we started a new group with, and people came, and I found my connection. But I had to go out and search for it. What I would say in terms of my relapse, there were a couple of things. Number one, I was seeking connection and I wasn't finding it in the recovery community. But two, I was arrogant. I thought, I'm good. I've been sober for over 12 years. I've read all the books. I know the drill. I'm good. I can do this. And it wasn't long before I couldn't do it anymore. And I just kept my head above water. And luckily, thank the universe, nobody was hurt. Nothing horrible happened, except that I didn't like myself anymore. And I said, I don't want to do this.
Which is totally enough. I think that doesn't need to be like anything horrible happening. It's like the disconnect between you and you, is a good enough reason. But I totally get what you mean. And what a blessing that nothing happened that like made it even harder for you to come back to yourself. So that's amazing in itself.
And it could have, I admit there were times I drank and drove when my kids were in the car. That's sort of like my heart clenches, my stomach gets in knots when I think of that. Yeah. Horrible things could have happened. Yeah. And I am grateful beyond measure that they didn't, because they could have. And had I continued down that road any longer, it definitely could have. And I am grateful beyond measure they did.
What a blessing, isn't it? Like sometimes I think the universe is protecting us so much because it's not our time to experience these things, because I feel like there's infinite benevolence of the universe. We sometimes don't see it, but I'm stubborn that it's there still.
Me too. I'm stubborn that it's there.
It's like really, it's protecting us so much so that we can find it out for ourselves. Like you said, like you did, find the connection with yourself through your own power, not through something external, which isn't bad, but like it's a different thing if you find it for yourself. So the universe kind of wanted you, so it looks to me, to like discover that for yourself and not like short circuit in any way to say like, okay, there's a different pattern interruption. So what you said about connection, to come back to that, really made my body shiver. And it's so simple in a way, but so true that we can have the connection to ourselves and we kind of like numb it through various addictions, but also the connection of others. I feel sometimes like there's this false belief of, oh, I'm so strong, I can handle everything myself. But then again, you need connection. And I totally get when you said that this group of men, that wasn't just like the right atmosphere for you, it wasn't resonating. So you need something that resonates with you. And for every one of us listening, with all our different addictions and things we crave and things we numb, the connection part, I think, is really still underrated, which is quite an interesting thing in a world where everything seems to be so connected and we're kind of overflowing with communities and apps where we could or could not talk or do whatever. But it's a deep connection. It's not the like, hey, how are you? Hey, what have you done this weekend? But it's like the soul connection that we
Absolutely.
crave.
We crave. Absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure.
And that we like. So the question like that comes up is how to find these soul connections, basically, if we're in a state where we want to connect to ourselves, and maybe we need the soul connection from outside to come back to ourselves. How to open up, how to be vulnerable, how to share your story, which you so beautifully do, where I don't have any hesitance to ask you things, which is amazing. By the way, thank you. Because of sometimes, there's this tiptoeing around when things happen that are falling out of what we call normal for whatever reason. But it's not there with you. So there's an openness and a vulnerability, and that is something to honor because it's really hard thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And, there have been so many studies recently that we have an epidemic of loneliness right now. We have more and more, as you said, apps and methods of communicating and more friends online and more connections, just thousands and thousands. And yet it's an epidemic of loneliness. And I heard that from so many women that I spoke to. And it is hard, it's really hard. It's hard to make those connections, to be vulnerable, to say I'm lonely, to say, I don't know you that well, but can we go for a walk? Can we meet and have coffee? Can we connect? Because online is wonderful. And like you said, I am grateful for technology. I am not demonizing it at all. I am grateful. My sister is in California and I'm in Portugal. I have friends in New Zealand. My kids are in Scotland and in Switzerland. And I am grateful beyond measure that I can communicate. So I am not demonizing. However, we need to step out of it. And then especially post-COVID, when everybody pulled so far in, it's sort of like relearning that coming out is hard. It's really hard. And ironically, for me, to go to your question about finding that connection, like I said, it takes vulnerability, it takes curiosity, it takes being present, all of those things. But ironically, the first step is to go in. So what tools do we need to go in to connect to self, to find that courage to be open and vulnerable and curious? And so the number one tool for me has always been journaling. I have journaled since I was a young teenager. And that is one of the tools that I always, always use in workshops and when working with women. Both of my books, the first half is sort of a tale, and the second half is a journaling workbook for people to follow the protagonist's own journey while seeking that connection within self. Because that's my belief, is that we need to unearth and bring out that willingness to be honest, vulnerable, and connect. Because in order to find the connection, we have to be ourselves. It's sort of a weird conundrum. The other tool, which you and I were talking about earlier, is that I do a lot of visualization. I do it for myself and I do it within workshops about, so what is it that I'm seeking? If I'm seeking to alleviate this intense loneliness, to find my tribe, to find that connection, what can I do? What can I do, universe? Help me.
Mm.
And I will go in and say, here's what I need. Here's what I'm craving. What can I do? Because a lot of times what we'll crave and will sort, for me, I speak for myself. I run in circles. I sort of get on this like, and I don't get anywhere. And I need to have that sacred pause, that slowing down, going within and asking. And when I'm asking the universe, I'm asking my higher self, I'm asking whatever code name you want to use to please inspire me. Give me the inspiration. Show me. That's one of my very, very favorite prayers, to use that word, however one wants to use it, is show me. Please show me. And that tool has been invaluable for me. I came to Portugal not knowing the language, not knowing anybody here. And my husband and I moved here, and it was easy enough to enroll in classes and to study classes online, or to study Portuguese online. But to actually meet other people, to connect, it's challenging. And so I literally, went inside and said, okay, show me, I need help. How do I meet people at my age with no kids and not studying the language and not knowing, and I have met people through different ways and then said, would you mind meeting for coffee? I would love to talk more. So that vulnerability, that willingness to show myself and say, I'm new here. I don't know. I don't have friends. Would you be willing to meet for coffee so that we can connect? You sound like a really cool person. I'm a member within this, I've been here for 1 year, a little over a year. And the apartment that we're living in right now, we've been here 1 year, exactly. And I'm in a book club now. This other woman and I that met each other said, let's create a book club. And we created a book club, and we have 10 other women all seeking that connection.
Yeah.
And we all come together. And another woman that's in recovery, and she and I created a recovery group. And there's now 5 or 6 of us that come together and meet weekly because we sought that connection. But we had to come out and say, this is what I need. And then once we put it up there, finding out, oh God, I need that too. So it's that willingness to be vulnerable, that willingness to ask for help, to seek that connection, to, yeah.
What comes to my mind really is like the golden thread you talked about for me is like this proactiveness. And I love that, because I've learned through studying Kabbalah, which was really dear to me when I started, still is God, the universe, however you want to call it, is a proactive force. And by us being proactive ourselves, we kind of connect to that light. And that is what I'm seeing in your story, is like this, you craved it, you didn't find it, that like made you uncomfortable or made you feel lonely or lost or however not aligned, and you created it. All the time you're creating the things that you're craving. So you're not going into victimhood saying like, oh, it's not there, I can, well, what should I do, my poor self, which you can easily do, because it's so easy to fall into that. But you can also go out and say like, okay, it's not there, but let's be vulnerable. Let's stop trying it and see if everyone shows up or nobody shows up. But like, I try it for myself because I need it desperately. And I feel like this, if you trust that whatever is inside of us, it's meant for us, and that whatever we have, others have too. So you craving this means other crave that too. It's more about finding them than it is about like doubting yourself if it's needed. it's like you creating your tribe so that you have whatever you need, you have the connection. And that is something that you do from the inside out. And I think that is something we could like use as a metaphor for like however we live our lives, to like say like, if it's not there, it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be there. Maybe it means I am the one who should initiate it. I am the one who should create it, to be vulnerable and say like, I'm putting myself out there. Here I am with all my heart, my soul, my vulnerability, my loneliness, my anxiety, my fear, my whatever. Is there anyone too? It's a scary moment. Scary.
It is. It's a real scary moment. And you're saying, I don't know the answers. I'm alone here. I'm interested in that full vulnerability. And yet by asking and by, as you said, by putting it out there, it comes back tenfold, but we have to be willing to ask the questions, to show the curiosity, to find out what that craving is, So many of us just sort of bumper car through life, sort of, just getting bounced around with what we're supposed to do, have to do, and not take that sacred pause and take a moment and say, what is it? What do I need here? What would fill my cup? What is it that is, yeah, the word that you and I've used is just, what am I craving? What is it that is going to fill me up? And then being willing to do the work to get there. Because sitting on one's couch in one's living room and saying, this is what I want. Okay, this is what I want. Come on. I'm waiting. It doesn't happen. No one's going to knock on your door. Are you looking for a friend?
Would be nice though.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, true. It's the proactivity. And also I feel like this like willingness to look into our shadows. And I feel that is something that we tend to try to avoid because maybe we feel we're not strong enough. We feel it's like too deep, too uncomfortable to like, I cannot hold it. And so we try to like, bypass the shadow and just be the light. And it's so, so, so important to go there. And again, if you have it, you can handle it. However horrible it is. It doesn't, I don't say it's like good that it happened, but if it's there, it's for you to learn that lesson and you can handle it. The universe is not breaking you. The universe is giving you only as much as you can handle. So that means you're extra strong if you have experienced something really, really horrible, really terrifying. And I think the moment we kind of connect to that benevolence and maybe that trust in ourselves, even to look there and see like, okay, well, it's uncomfortable. And yeah, I'd rather watch a movie or listen to a podcast or read a book, which is all nice. But like, I'm taking that time, even if it's 10 minutes of journaling or 10 minutes of like praying and asking like, what to do. Go there and just have that bit of like, looking at your shadow in a non-judgmental kind way that can do so much. And we're strong enough to do that. We're built for that.
Absolutely. I love that. And one of the things that I find really difficult with some people is that they choose a spiritual bypass, is the way I've heard it called. And you used the word bypass, and I love that. That spiritual bypass of, that's ugly, that's icky. I'll just sit and meditate and not look at it and not do the work. I shall just meditate. And the truth is, when we have that shadow, and we need to take it out, embrace it, see it, learn from it. It's there for a reason. We can't just meditate our way away from it. It doesn't work. That's not how the universe works. So, and I know a lot of women especially, but men do it too, who choose that spiritual bypass and are not grounded, are sort of floaty and talk a good show, but haven't done their work, haven't looked at their shadow, are judgmental as hell. Listen to me, judging them. I know.
There must be some work to do for the next year. Yes, it has.
Oh dear. But yeah, that's very hard for me to stomach when I see people using that spiritual bypass of holier than thou and not looking at that shadow, which is huge. And we all have it. You're not
Yes.
wrong for
No.
having that shadow and having that shadow side and all of the stuff that we either brought in to this lifetime or that we've learned along the way, or, so much of my shadow I definitely learned when I was growing up. And certain aspects of that shadow side kept me alive, kept me okay. It's not serving me now. So I need to look at it, embrace it, and live alongside of it without letting it control me. But it has to be acknowledged. We can't choose to
Yeah.
bypass.
Thank you for that deeply, because I feel so much like wonder, sometimes annoyment around, is that even a word? I don't know. I feel
It
really
is
annoyed.
absolutely
Good.
annoyment. Absolutely. And if
Around
it isn't,
this,
it should be.
very good. You're an author, you must know. So this, like, it really annoys me to see how people like try to like elevate themselves by saying like, I'm spiritual, I'm the light, I'm meditating, or even going to church. It doesn't have to be like spirituality. Like the whole blueprint of how church worked, at least where I live, is like spiritual bypassing in essence. It's like I'm so good, I'm so, but if you look away, they talk about you. They're not supporting you. They, so there's definitely the shadow side, which nobody talks about. And what I want to touch on is this trying to release as fast as we can the shadow, as if it's not meant to be there, as if we're somehow bad for having a shadow, and as if, not to blame, but like how society made us believe that we must be all light, and if we have a shadow, there's something wrong with us. And instead of saying, like you said, it's part of all of us. We all have a shadow and we all have light. And without the shadow, the light cannot exist. So we kind of need to have the shadow so that we can see and acknowledge the light. So you're not wrong for having a shadow. The only question is, are you willing to look at it, and then please look at it with love? Don't release it as fast as possible to like now extract it from yourself, because the universe is not, it's an inclusive one. There's no extraction. There's no destroying of energies. It's just transmuting. So look at it, love it for what it's there, because whatever trauma we have, whatever shadow we have, I truly believe we had it for a reason. And you said it kept you alive. So it essentially, it protected you through a time where there was no other way you could protect yourself. So it's kind of a good thing. But now it's not serving you. You have outgrown it, but it doesn't mean that this thing is bad. So why are we trying to like release it as something that is like ugly, like kind of icky, kind of like really, really, instead of saying like, that's part of me. Thank you for being here. Now I don't no longer need you. Please, let's transmute you into something more beautiful.
Right. Absolutely. I totally agree.
Which is like, I love that you're doing the journaling and that you're emphasizing on the journaling, because I think that's such a beautiful tool for it, and it's underrated still, even though so many people do it. I feel like there's so much more power to be drawn out of it, and it's something that you can do without having money, having much time, without having someone who guides you. Yeah, it's beneficial to have someone, no doubt about it, but if you don't have, you can still do it. There's no excuse for not doing it.
Absolutely. There's a book by a woman named Julia Cameron called Artist's Way, and she talks about morning pages, which I love. It's sort of like you're opening up first thing in the morning, and you're at that open sort of raw place, and just journal. There doesn't have to be any meaning. We're not looking for beautiful prose. It's just externalizing that internal process and exploring, just writing what's up. Because in my opinion, we can't move away from that shadow side until we've embraced it and understood it. And the only way we can do that is through exploring, through excavating. And we can do that with therapy for sure. But as you said, that takes a lot of time and energy and money. It's not cheap to do that in most places. And also, you have to find the right connection.
Yes.
Sometimes there are therapists that don't go down the same path, that don't have the same thing. But when we're working with self on that deep level, we have the connection. Sometimes it takes a while to find it if we haven't ever done this kind of work, but it's there and it's just waiting. And it's a beautiful thing to explore.
Which also gives you, when you talked right now, that came back to me, which also gives you this like power back to yourself. It's about reclaiming our power, because yeah, you can go to a therapist and there's nothing wrong with that, but you kind of give your power away, saying like, I need you, dear therapist, and I hope we can go on that, to like help me work with my shadow. And the moment you say like, well, who can do it better than me? I'm strong enough. I do have enough knowledge. I do have enough strength. I do have enough power, commitment, whatever, to do so. You kind of like not giving the power away, which I think is really something we should learn as a society, to like really reclaim our power, if that's for like our health or our education or our inner work, because you can do it yourself too. And yeah, you can have additional help, but you can also do it yourself. You can like really go really far on your own when you trust yourself. And like you said, maybe in the start that it's not there, or it's feeling like a mask or like shallow or whatever, but it doesn't need to stay there. The moment you open up and be vulnerable to yourself, it can go really deep, really fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's again about like being vulnerable, isn't it? Like even to ourselves, admitting in front of ourselves.
Even to ourselves, yeah. That's another one of those conundrums that doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's actually admitting to yourself, I have this problem, or I feel this thing, and making that admission to self sometimes is too hard for some people. Yeah. They are not willing to be vulnerable to oneself. And in the 12-step recovery world, the first step is admitting that you have a problem, and the second step is admitting, it's being willing to work with another person and admitting to yourself. It's sort of like, I have to admit to myself that I've got this problem, and I am willing to then work with it. And then it gets more into a spiritual paradigm. But that very first step is saying, I don't have the answers. I don't know. I have got this problem, shadow, whatever you want to call it, and being willing to then move forward and look at it, however one does that, and it can be done through myriad ways, through creativity, through painting, drawing, journaling, however one wants to explore these pieces. I have a dear friend in New Zealand who's an artist, and she does a lot of her shadow work through paint. But she's not painting to sell. She's painting to externalize and look at and explore that shadow that she's feeling is rearing its head again and again, and being willing to embrace it through art.
That is so beautiful. I feel like there's the universe, or we ourselves, we are having so many opportunities for this. We're having so many opportunities to connect to ourselves, to like unearth that shadow, transmute it to light, bring pain to power. And it actually, like, maybe it doesn't even matter which tool we use. We use the one that like resonates most, and none is better than the other. But it's like about starting to acknowledge that to ourselves, and then finding our own expression, our own way of dealing with that, instead of saying like, oh, well, let's rather not look at it. So the first step, as you said, it's the most important.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That feels just complete for now, even though I could talk on with you for hours.
Well, let's do it again. Let's talk again, because I feel like we are connected for a reason, and we've got a lot of things to explore. I just,
Me
I
too.
love
Me
talking
too.
to you and exploring.
We will do that again. Me too. I feel kind of sad of like wrapping up the episode, but on the other hand, it feels just like so complete at the moment that I think, what can we add? We do that again. We do. I thank you, my dear, for your openness, your presence, your energy, your vulnerability, and all the strengths that you brought up. What a gift. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your service, what you're doing for the world, for women, and for making this happen. I really appreciate it, Anna, and we will stay
Thank you.
connected for
We
sure.
will. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.